What Ibrahim Traoré himself wants, what Africa needs, is to have 54 Ibrahim Traorés as presidents in each of Africa's 54 countries. That's what Africa needs. That's what Africa deserves, and that's what Africa must get today. My name is DJ Bwakali. Welcome to African Awakening. One thing that is really going to help us today in this journey is to understand how an ordinary young African man rose in less than 10 years to become one of the most extraordinary, consequential leaders of this generation. We're talking about Ibrahim Traoré. Let's now do a comparative analysis between the two Traorés. And as we do this comparative analysis, ask yourself, where does your country's president lie? Does he lie on the side of Honoré Traoré, or is she family located on the side of Ibrahim Traoré? Ask yourself that question. So we're going to look at a few characteristics of these two Traorés. And as we do that, just scratch your head. If you're a Kenyan, ask yourself, is William Ruto on the side of Ibrahim Traoré, or is he on the side of Honoré Traoré? If you're Tanzanian, ask yourself, is Mama Samia Suluhu exhibiting the characteristics of Ibrahim Traoré, or is she exhibiting the characteristics of Honoré Traoré? If you're South African, ask yourself the same question about President Cyril Ramaphosa. When I mention the characteristics of Honoré Traoré, are they going to be similar to Cyril Ramaphosa? And when I mention the characteristics, the attributes of Ibrahim Traoré, are they going to be similar to your president, to Ramaphosa or not? Same thing to Bola Tinubu in Nigeria. Same thing to Mahama in Ghana. Whoever your African president is, Hakainde Hichilema for the Zambians, whoever your African president is, ask yourself, is that president in sync, in harmony with the attributes of Ibrahim Traoré or with the attributes of Honoré Traoré? And I'll tell you what you should then do if you realize that your president exhibits the attributes of Honoré Traoré. What you can do. Because remember, it's about awakening, uniting, and transforming. Let us start with the attributes of Honoré Traoré. Now, Honoré Traoré had risen within the ranks of a corrupt regime, the corrupt regime of a president who was stealing from his people, Blaise Compaoré. Honoré Traoré rose within that to become the chief of the army, to become the boss of the army. Meaning that Honoré Traoré was about self-preservation. He was about self-preservation. And the moment he realized that Blaise Compaoré was on his way out, the moment Blaise Compaoré fled to Côte d'Ivoire in 2014, Honoré Traoré opportunistically seized that and wanted to steal from the people, he conveniently began to position himself as different from Blaise Compaoré, who had just fled. Honoré Traoré was about the big man syndrome. The same guy who was chief of the army, who was in Blaise Compaoré's inner circle, now wanted to masquerade as the antithesis of Blaise Compaoré, as the very opposite of Blaise Compaoré. He opportunistically wanted to position himself and simply become yet another Blaise Compaoré. But the army itself was not going to have it. If your president has opportunistically positioned himself as or herself to advance their own selfish interests, then your president is like Honoré Traoré. If your president preaches water but drinks wine, if your president preaches water but drinks wine, then your president is like Honoré Traoré. If your president says one thing from one side of the mouth and another thing from the other side of the mouth, then your president is like Honoré Traoré. If your president projects an image of somebody who is helping the people, who is working for the people, but in reality, that's not who he is or who she is, then your president is like Honoré Traoré. Now, let us look at the attributes of the other Traoré, Ibrahim Traoré. Remember, this is somebody who in his early 20s was already opposed to the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer. This is somebody whom in his mid-20s was already being promoted within the army because of his sheer discipline. His work was speaking for itself. His fruits embodied the very spirit of hard work and diligence that was lacking in his own president at the time. And so, at this time, we are not even going to look at the man that he became, not yet. We're only looking at the attributes that he had exhibited until that point when he was 26 years old. Which attributes? Sheer focus, utter discipline, serving the people, being in the forefront in northern Burkina Faso, where he was located at the time, digging deep to understand what was ailing his society, ailing his community, being proactive as a student by being in this Marxist organization, being extremely proactive, not passively watching as this country was going to the dogs, but asking himself what he could do as a young person. And so, if your president lives what they preach, if your president has a track record of serving the people, of seeking solutions for the country, if your president has that track record of being on the side of the people, then your president is exhibiting the attributes of Ibrahim Traoré. And as we continue with this show, as we continue with this episode and bring out even more attributes of Ibrahim Traoré as an ordinary person, ask yourself, is your president exhibiting those very attributes with all the power they have as the most powerful man or woman in your country? Because if they are not exhibiting those attributes, then your president is not in Ibrahim Traoré's corner. Your president is in the other corner of Honoré Traoré. What then should happen? Just as Honoré Traoré was head of state for only 24 hours, just as there were no delegations to go and negotiate with him, to go and tell him how good he is as president, just as swift action was taken at the time, in the right way, ask yourself why your president deserves more time. Ask yourself that question. Ask yourself, what recourse do you have in the constitution of your country to deprive your president of more time? Just as Honoré Traoré got only 1 day as head of state, your president, if your president is on the side of Honoré Traoré, that president deserves only 1 term as president. That president should not exceed 1 term as president. That president doesn't deserve your time, doesn't deserve the time of the electorate. Just as Honoré Traoré was only president for 1 day. Ask yourself that question. Which Traoré does your president's attributes subscribe to? And so remember these fellow Africans, that just as Honoré Traoré faded into obscurity, the reason you did not even know that he existed was because he faded into obscurity, because he was part of that corrupt ruling elite. That is the same way that your president, if they're exhibiting those same attributes of Honoré Traoré, if they are lifetime members of the corrupt ruling elite, that is the same way that they should fade into obscurity. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is that just as Ibrahim Traoré then rose to become the transformative leader that he is today because of those very attributes he had as an ordinary person, just as that happened, if your president is in the corner of Honoré Traoré, then your country deserves somebody who is like Ibrahim Traoré. If you are not that person, then you should support a leader in your country who exhibits those attributes of Ibrahim Traoré. It doesn't help Africa if all we are going to do is to only speak about Ibrahim Traoré and Burkina Faso. What Ibrahim Traoré himself wants, what Africa needs, is to have 54 Ibrahim Traorés as presidents in each of Africa's 54 countries. That's what Africa needs. That's what Africa deserves, and that's what Africa must get today.
You have not seen freedom fighters. I am one of this generation.
Now, fellow Africans, as we approach the conclusion of today's episode, let's ask ourselves one question. What other lessons are there to be learned from these two Traorés? What other lessons are there to be learned? Because if we don't learn the lessons that we should in our respective countries across the continent, then we will continue having Honoré Traorés as opposed to Ibrahim Traorés. Lesson number 1. Revolutions do not replace the old with the old. You cannot do that. You cannot have a revolution and replace the leaders with the same type of leaders that they want, like the ones that you're replacing. Whether that revolution is at the ballot box or in the streets, you cannot and you must not replace leaders with the same type of leaders, because that has been the story of Africa. That has been the story of Africa. If you're looking at the Arab Spring, the Arab Spring ultimately did not deliver transformative leaders in Northern Africa. Kenya, when you go to elections in 2027, are you going to replace William Ruto with just another William Ruto? Somebody whose name may not be William Ruto, but somebody who thinks, talks, speaks, and acts like William Ruto. That cannot be the story of Africa. We cannot have a situation where revolutions keep ending up with a whimper, with a stutter of leaders who are just cut from the same cloth. We cannot have that. We must learn that lesson. We must learn that lesson from Burkina Faso. We need to have revolutions in Africa delivering transformative leaders. That is the Northern Star. This is the second lesson. Legitimacy is more than rank. You see, Honoré Traoré was as big as they get. Honoré Traoré was the chief of the army. There was no higher rank than that in the army than what Honoré Traoré had. On the other hand, Ibrahim Traoré, to date, he goes by the name of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. That's not a senior rank. Thomas Sankara himself, he too was a captain.
Je suis parmi les 0,035% de ceux qui ont eu la chance d'être des fonctionnaires et d'avoir un salaire régulièrement. Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est normal que des gens comme moi soient régulièrement payés et que le reste de la population, des millions et des millions de personnes, soient dans la misère continue?
Legitimacy is not about rank. If you're looking at it in political terms, this habit of Africans always electing big names with the loudest voices and the fattest wallets must end, because legitimacy in leadership is not about the bank account of these leaders. After all, most of them have stolen that money from the people. And the African electorate must understand that a time has come for them to begin electing leaders who do not have high ranks in terms of their names in society, in terms of the money they have, in terms of the clout they wield, but they must begin electing Africans who hold a high rank in terms of being servant leaders. We must begin to do that as Africans. It's not about the rank. It's not about the wallets. It's not about the loud mouths of these people. A lot of times it's the electorate themselves who say that so-and-so cannot be president because he doesn't have enough money, because she doesn't have enough clout. We, the people of Africa, must now use our sovereign power to elect true servant leaders. Even if they are 26 years old, even if they are 60 years old and with no money, we must begin to elect African leaders, not on the basis of their rank, but on the basis of their leadership credentials and track record. Here's the third lesson. Ultimately, the streets are more powerful than even the barracks. You see, the same popular revolution that had kicked out Blaise Compaoré and for a day brought in Honoré Traoré also kicked him out, because at the end of the day, the sovereign power is not even in the barracks, it's in the streets, which is why the reason Ibrahim Traoré continues to be successful today as president is not because of the army, but because of the people. The streets are the most powerful. But a time has come for Africans to translate street power into political power. Because the challenge we have currently in Africa is that street power often ends right there in the streets. Street power must deliver political power so that the power that is in the hands of the people can end up on the presidential pulpit serving the people. And here is the final lesson that we will glean today from those two Traorés, Ibrahim Traoré and Honoré Traoré. The lesson is simple. Africa is changing. Africa is changing. It is not business as usual. It's not business as usual. Just as Burkina Faso could not stomach more than a day of Honoré Traoré, today's Africa must increasingly be zero tolerant to all those presidents and political leaders who merely are there to enrich themselves, who exhibit the big man syndrome. Today's Africa is changing. Today's Africa is growing increasingly intolerant to those kinds of leaders. It is not business as usual. You must ensure in Zambia, if Hakainde Hichilema starts to exhibit the big man syndrome, the people of Zambia must call him out on that. They must hold him accountable. Ghana, Mahama, President Mahama, you have a second chance to redeem yourself and show that you can be a different person. Personally, I pray that you do. I pray that you do. The same must be true across Africa. Tinubu, all the presidents who are currently occupying office. But my call today, my call to action today is not even directed to those presidents, but the people of Africa, the electorate. You are the ones who are riding the wave of change in Africa today. You must ensure that you tap into the power of that wave. You must ensure that that wave delivers transformative leaders to all the offices, all the political, all the elective offices in your country. Africa is changing. Change is here. Every country in Africa must ensure that it is part of that change. You must ensure that you're part of that change. You must not be left behind. You must not be left behind. Africa is changing. It must change for the better, because for 60 years, it has kept changing for the worse. When we have kept replacing the same old corrupt leaders with more corrupt leaders, Africa is changing. Africa is changing. Don't be left behind. So before I move on from this bit, before I go to the final 2 minutes of this episode, I just want to remind you one thing. Honoré Traoré became a mere bookmark in Burkina Faso's journey of change. He was a mere bookmark. So what we have done today is we have simply gone back to that particular chapter in that particular time period to look at what Africa doesn't need so that we can emphasize what Africa needs through transformative leaders like Ibrahim Traoré. Do not forget that. Do not forget that bookmark of Honoré Traoré. And every time we talk about Ibrahim Traoré, at the back of your mind, always remember that the other side of the coin is Honoré Traoré, is Blaise Compaoré, and leaders like them. Don't forget that. Because if you forget, then we will fall in the trap of electing and emboldening and empowering Honoré. So, fellow Africans, what happened is that Honoré Traoré then disappeared. A mere 8 years after Honoré Traoré disappeared from the scene, Ibrahim Traoré emerged on the scene. In September 2022, Ibrahim Traoré, who had been a mere 26 years old at that time, located in northern Burkina Faso, he emerged. And Ibrahim Traoré is still on the scene today. He will remain on the scene because Africa is changing, and Africa will not stomach the same old games that used to be played by the neo-colonialists, by the imperialists, of seeking to replace leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, either fatally through the bullet or by sponsoring coup d'etats that were not of the people and for the people. That's not going to happen now. Africa is changing. So today, again, I urge you, as I conclude, I urge you this one thing. Ask yourself whether the man or woman at the top, at the presidency in your country, is exemplifying Ibrahim Traoré or Honoré Traoré. Let us ensure that increasingly across Africa, we will increasingly have presidents who exemplify Ibrahim Traoré, who exemplify Thomas Sankara, who exemplify Patrice Lumumba. We will increasingly have such presidents, because that's how Africa then transforms.